She wasn't supposed to be standing there. The woman in the black gown touched her elbow. Firm, but not quite rude, and gestured toward the side entrance. "Ma'am, the general seating is through those doors." And for just a moment she considered it, turning around, leaving. But then she whispered to herself, "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." The ballroom was already filling. Crystal chandeliers, white orchids on it, women in gowns that probably cost more than her monthly mortgage. She'd known this would happen. Not the exact moment, maybe, but the feeling. The one where you're treated like you don't belong, even when you have every right to be there. She adjusted the strap of her dress. It was simple, elegant, she thought. But here, in this room, it felt small. The woman in black was still watching her, waiting. And that's when she heard her own voice. Calm, steady, maybe a little too quiet. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." The woman blinked, but she didn't move. That was the moment everything quietly began to unravel. This is a golden heart story for anyone who's ever walked into a room and felt invisible. For anyone who's been underestimated because of their age, their appearance, or the quiet way they move through the world. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, have you ever been made to feel like you didn't belong to somewhere you absolutely did? Because tonight, that feeling is about to shift. Her name was Margaret, 53, widowed for 6 years. She lived in a two-bedroom house in a suburb most people drove through without noticing. She worked part-time at a nonprofit that helped women transition back into the workforce after loss, divorce, death, illness. She was good at listening, good at being still, good at making herself smaller when the room got too loud. But tonight, she wasn't supposed to be small. Tonight, she'd been invited. By name. She just hadn't expected it to feel like this. The man across the ballroom didn't notice her at first. His name was Henry Bradford. 61. Tall, silver hair that looked intentional, not accidental. In a V-suit that fit the way expensive things do without trying. He was holding a glass of champagne he hadn't sipped from. He hated these events. The performances, the politeness that barely hid the transactions happening underneath. But he came anyway. Because his late wife had loved them. And because somewhere in the back of his mind, he still heard her voice telling him not to become one of those men who disappeared into work and forgot how to be human. So here he was, human, tired, wondering how soon he could leave without it being noticed. Margaret moved toward the registration table near the entrance. A young woman with a tablet glanced up. Name? Margaret Sinclair. The woman's finger hovered over the screen, scrolled, paused. Then she frowned. "I'm sorry, I'm not seeing you on the guest list." Margaret's stomach dropped. That's not possible. I received an invitation. I RSVP'd 2 weeks ago. Let me check again." The pause felt endless. Behind her someone sighed, a small impatient sound. Margaret's cheeks burned. "Oh wait, here you are, table 12. Relief. But it didn't erase the feeling. The one that said you almost didn't make it, you almost weren't enough. Henry was seated at table 3. Close to the stage, close to the donor wall. Close to people who wrote checks with too many zeros and smiled like it didn't matter. He knew most of them. Had built half their portfolios. Had listened to their problems over whiskey and told them things they didn't want to hear but needed to. That's what he did. Wealth management. Advisory. The kind of work that made people think you had all the answers. He didn't. He just knew how to ask the right questions. Across the room, Margaret sat down at table 12. It was near the back, the farthest from the stage. The woman to her left was already deep in conversation with someone else. The man to her right was on his phone. She folded her hands in her lap and tried not to feel like she'd made a mistake. The MC took the stage. A woman in red with a smile sharp enough to cut glass. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 33rd Annual Philanthropy Gala benefiting the Women's Empowerment Initiative. Applause. Margaret clapped softly. Henry didn't. Tonight, we honor the individuals and organizations who have transformed lives, who have chosen to invest not in portfolios, but in people. More applause. Margaret glanced around the room. Everyone looked so certain, so present. She felt like a shadow. But before we begin, the MC continued. I want to recognize someone truly extraordinary. Someone whose generosity has quietly shaped this organization for over a decade. Margaret's heart tightened. Not for herself, but because she knew what that kind of recognition meant. It meant someone had given everything, and no one had noticed until now. This year's Lifetime Impact Award goes to someone who didn't seek the spotlight, who didn't ask for applause, who simply showed up, year after year, life after life. The room went still. Henry set down his glass. Something in the MC's tone had shifted. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in honoring. Margaret's hands went cold. Margaret Sinclair. The room erupted. But Margaret didn't move. She sat frozen, her name still echoing in her ears like something she'd misheard. The woman to her left turned, eyes wide. That's you? Margaret's throat closed. She nodded. Barely. Go, the woman whispered, smiling now. Go up there. But Margaret's legs wouldn't work. At table 3, Henry was staring at the back of the room. At a woman in a simple black dress, standing slowly, like she was still deciding whether this was real. He didn't recognize her, but he recognized the look on her face. Disbelief, grief, pride struggling to surface. Margaret walked toward the stage. The applause felt too loud, too much. She wasn't supposed to be the person people clapped for. She was the person who helped those people. But as she climbed the stairs, the MC's smile softened into something real. Margaret has donated over $1.2 million to this organization over the last 12 years. Most of it anonymously, most of it in small, steady gifts that added up to something extraordinary. Margaret's eyes blurred. She hadn't known anyone was counting. She also volunteers 20 hours a week. She mentors, she listens, she shows up. The MC handed her the award, a glass sculpture that caught the light and threw it back in 100 directions. Margaret, we see you, and we are so grateful. Margaret took the microphone. Her hands were shaking. I don't really know what to say. Her voice cracked. I didn't do this for recognition. I did it because someone did it for me once. When I had nothing. When I didn't think I'd survive losing my husband. The room was silent now. Listening. A woman I'd never met paid for my groceries one day. I was at the register, and my card declined. And I was about to leave everything there. And she just stepped in. She said, let me. Please. Margaret's breath hitched. I never saw her again, but I never forgot her. And I decided that if I ever had enough, if I ever got back on my feet, I'd do the same. She looked out at the room, at the faces watching her. So this isn't mine. This belongs to her, wherever she is. She stepped off the stage. The applause followed her all the way back to her table. But she didn't sit down, because standing near the exit, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, was Henry Bradford. And he was walking toward her. That was remarkable. His voice was low, warm. Margaret turned. Up close, he looked different than she'd expected. Older, maybe, but not in a tired way. In a way that made you think he'd lived enough to know what mattered. Thank you, she said quietly. I mean it. He extended his hand. Henry Bradford. She shook it. His grip was firm, steady. Margaret Sinclair. I know. He smiled. Everyone does now. She laughed short, nervous. I didn't want that. I could tell. They stood there for a moment, the noise of the Gala swirling around them. Can I ask you something? Henry said. Sure. How did you do it? Margaret frowned. Do what? Give that much, for that long, without anyone knowing. She looked down at the award in her hands. I didn't think anyone should know. Why not? Because it wasn't about me. Henry was quiet. Then I think that's the rarest thing in a room like this. Margaret studied him. You don't seem like you want to be here. He laughed. Actually laughed. Is it that obvious? A little. I'm here because my wife used to drag me to these things. She loved them. The people, the stories, I had tolerated them. And now, his smile faded. Now I come because I don't know what else to do with the space she left behind. Margaret's chest tightened. She knew that space. I'm sorry. Don't be. He met her eyes. I think you understand. She did. Can I buy you a drink? Henry asked. Margaret blinked. There's an open bar. I know. He grinned. But it feels more intentional this way. She hesitated. Then nodded. Okay. They moved toward the bar at the edge of the ballroom. Henry ordered a whiskey. Margaret asked for white wine. They stood side by side, not quite facing each other. I have to admit something, Henry said. What? I looked you up, just now, on my phone. Margaret's stomach flipped. And you're not just a donor. She went still. You sold your house 3 years ago. A house worth over $2 million. You moved into something smaller. And you gave almost everything away. Her throat tightened. How do you? I'm a wealth manager, Henry said quietly. I see patterns, I see sacrifice. And I see people who don't know how to stop giving even when it costs them everything. Margaret's hands trembled. It wasn't a sacrifice. Yes, Henry said gently. It was. She turned to him. Why does it matter to you? Because, he said, I spent 30 years helping people hold on to their wealth, teaching them how to grow it, protect it, and I was good at it. He paused. But I never met anyone who understood what it was actually for. Margaret's eyes burned. You do, Henry said, and I think that's why you're standing here alone. She looked away. I'm not alone. Aren't you? The question landed soft. But it hurt. Because he was right. They didn't go back to their tables. Instead, they found a corner near the windows. Away from the noise, the speeches, the endless champagne. Henry leaned against the wall. Margaret sat on the ledge, her award resting beside her. Tell me something true, Henry said. About what? About you. Something no one here knows. Margaret hesitated. Then I'm afraid I gave too much. That I won't have enough left, for myself. Henry didn't react. He just listened. I thought if I could help enough people, I wouldn't feel so empty. But some days, I do. I feel like I'm disappearing. Her voice cracked, and I don't know how to stop. Henry was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I know that feeling. Margaret looked up. After my wife died, I threw myself into work. I took on more clients, more responsibility. I told myself I was building something. But really? He exhaled. I was just running. From what? From the quiet, from the house, from the fact that I didn't know who I was without her. Margaret's chest ached. Do you know now? Henry smiled sadly. I'm starting to. They talked for an hour. Maybe more. About loneliness, about the lies people tell themselves to keep moving. Margaret told him about her husband. How he'd died suddenly, how she'd spent 2 years barely breathing. Henry told her about his wife. how she'd fought cancer for 3 years, how he'd held her hand until the very end. I thought I'd be ready, Henry said, but you're never ready. No, Margaret whispered. You're not. At some point, Henry's hand brushed hers. It wasn't intentional. But neither of them moved away. Can I tell you something? Margaret said. Anything. I didn't think I'd feel this again. Feel what? Sane. Henry turned to her. You are. But just as the moment settled, a voice cut through. Henry? They both turned. A woman in a silver gown stood a few feet away. Mid-40s, polished, sharp. Her eyes landed on Margaret, then back on Henry. I've been looking for you. Henry straightened. Vanessa. The woman smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I didn't realize you brought someone. I didn't, Henry said evenly. We just met. Vanessa's gaze flicked to Margaret, assessing, dismissing. How lovely. Margaret felt it immediately. The shift. The coldness. She stood. I should get back to my table. You don't have to, Henry started. But Vanessa stepped closer. Actually, Henry, we need to talk. About the merger, it's urgent. Henry's jaw tightened. Nat? Yes. Margaret picked up her award. It was nice meeting you, Henry. He looked at her, really looked. Margaret. But she was already walking away. Vanessa watched her go. Then turned to Henry. Who was that? Someone you just made feel small, Henry said quietly. Vanessa blinked. I didn't. Yes, you did. And for the first time that night, Henry felt something sharp and clear. Anger. Margaret left the gala early. She didn't say goodbye. She just walked out into the cool night air and stood on the steps, trying to breathe. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I'm sorry, that wasn't fair to you, Henry. She stared at it, then typed back. It's fine. You don't owe me anything. Another buzz. Can I see you again? Her hands shook. She wanted to say yes. But something stopped her. The feeling that she'd been here before. The feeling that letting someone in meant giving up another piece of herself she couldn't afford to lose. She didn't respond. Henry stood in the ballroom, staring at his phone. Vanessa was still talking. But he wasn't listening. Henry? He looked up. I have to go. What, we're not done? Yes, he said. We are. And he walked out. He found her on the steps, sitting alone, her award beside her like a quiet companion. You didn't answer, Henry said. Margaret didn't look up. I know. Why? Because I don't know how to do this. Do what? Let someone matter. Henry sat down beside her. I don't either. Margaret finally looked at him. Then why are you here? Because I think you're worth figuring it out for. Her breath caught. You don't even know me. I know enough. Henry, Margaret, listen to me. He turned toward her. I spent the last 5 years hiding. Pretending I was fine. Pretending work was enough. And tonight, for the first time, I felt something I thought I'd lost. What? Hope. Margaret's eyes filled. I can't be someone's hope. I barely have enough for myself. Then let me carry some of it, Henry said softly. Let me help. I don't need help. I know, but maybe I do. She looked at him, really looked, and saw it. The same exhaustion, the same fear, the same desperate, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late. I'm scared, she whispered. So am I. What if I can't? Then we'll figure it out. Margaret closed her eyes. And for the first time in years, she let herself say yes. They didn't kiss that night. They didn't make promises. They just sat together on the steps until the gala ended and the crowd spilled out into the night. And when Henry stood, he offered her his hand. Can I drive you home? Margaret hesitated, then took it. Okay, if this story reminds you of someone you lost, or almost lost, share it with them. Because sometimes the bravest thing we do is let someone in. Even when we're afraid. Even when it feels impossible. 3 months later, Margaret stood in Henry's kitchen. It was Sunday morning. Sunlight poured through the windows. Coffee brewing on the counter. Henry was reading the paper at the table. His reading glasses perched on his nose. She smiled. "You look like an old man." He glanced up, grinning. "I am an old man. Fair." She poured 2 cups of coffee and sat down across from him. "I have something to tell you," Margaret said. Henry set down the paper. "Okay, I'm thinking about going back to school." He raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "Social work, maybe counseling. I don't know yet, but I want to do more, officially." Henry reached across the table and took her hand. "I think that's perfect. You're not going to tell me I'm too old?" "God, no. You're just getting started." Margaret's throat tightened. "I wouldn't be doing this if it weren't for you." "Yes, you would," Henry said gently. "You just needed to remember you could." She squeezed his hand. "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me when I couldn't see myself." Henry stood, walked around the table, and kissed the top of her head. "You were always there, Margaret. I just turned on the light." Later that afternoon, they went for a walk. Through the neighborhood, past the houses with white fences and careful gardens. Margaret slipped her hand into his. "Do you ever think about her?" she asked quietly. "Every day." "Does it hurt?" "Sometimes, but not the way it used to." She nodded. "I think about him too. And I used to feel guilty. Like moving forward meant forgetting. And now I think he'd want this, for me." Henry stopped walking. Turned to her. "He would." Margaret smiled. Not perfectly. Not without sadness. But real. That night, they sat on Henry's porch, watching the sky turn purple. Margaret rested her head on his shoulder. "I don't know what happens next," she said. "Good." She laughed. "Good?" "Yeah, because neither do I, and I think that's the point." Margaret closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. She felt found. Thank you for spending this time with Golden Heart Stories. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe. Your support helps us keep telling stories that matter. Stories about second chances, about being seen, about learning that it's never too late to let someone in. Now tell me, what part of this story stayed with you the most? Drop it in the comments. And remember, you are not invisible. You are not too late. You are exactly where you're supposed to be.